maybe with a little bit of a little bit about the observance coming at the end of this week. So today is the 6th of Tevet, which makes Friday the 10th of Tevet. So Friday is one of the 4 fast days, the 4 fast days that surround the destruction of the temple. In this one, the official reason for the fast is the siege upon Jerusalem. However, there are 2 other events which take place at the same time. One is the translation of the Septuagint, which is sort of an interesting thing because that is the first time the Torah is translated into a foreign language. It's translated into Greek to be part of the great Library of Alexandria under Ptolemy, and there's even a very brilliant miracle that happens around it. And that miracle is the miracle of put 70 rabbis in 70 different rooms, right? You know the idea, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. Well, if there are 70 rabbis who all produce the same translation of the Torah at the same time, then we would say, wow, hey, that's a big miracle. That sounds better. If you ask me, that's a bigger one than Hanukkah, right? 70 rabbis agreeing is better than some light lasting, 7 days longer than expected. That I would say hands down. So why is that a tragedy? It's a tragedy on 2 fronts. Number one is once you put the Torah in translation, you are diminishing the Torah. There are many, many valences, there are many, many layers of meaning in Hebrew that do not exist in Greek. And so once you put the Torah into Greek, you are certainly diminishing it. The second reason is that the Talmud records 18 different changes that they made in order to, so to speak, keep the either the non-Jews from rebelling or from persecuting us, or another version of the same is that they didn't want to create misapprehension. So one of the classic ones is, there are 2 at the very beginning. Instead of saying Bereshit bara Elokim, Bereshit bara Elokim would strictly translate into in the beginning. Bara, Bereshit means in the beginning. Bara was created. Elokim, God. So we translate that in the beginning God created. What the rabbis were afraid of is that because the word bara, created, can be a transitive verb, it would sound like Bereshit created Elokim. That is not a good look for us Jews. And so they reworked the beginning of the Torah just to avoid that confusion. And then there's another, as the Torah goes on, it says, Na'aseh Adam b'tzalmenu, which is translated, at least in English, as let us make man. Now, the rabbis deliberately removed the plural. Rashi's interpretation of that is that is written so that God can teach us derech eretz, teach us manners, that we should ask permission. That God asked permission of the angels before he created the world. And so that was another one of those things. So there's a tradition that this fast day of the 10th of Tevet also commemorates the translation of the Torah, the necessary, or what is ultimately the diminishment of the Torah through translation. But then there was this third event. The third event is actually critical to the subject at hand, and that is the death of Ezra the scribe. So Ezra plays a role far beyond what I think most of us appreciate. The Torah was originally written in Tav Ivri, which is Paleo-Hebrew, which I will venture to say even Annie Sorno can't read. So I think I've tried it on her, right? If you look at for things like, for example, the seal of King Chizkiyahu. Seal of King Chizkiyahu is not easily read by modern Hebrew readers. Fundamentally it's a different font, and Ezra transposed the Torah into what's called Ktav Ashuri, Assyrian script, which is what we all read today. That is what it's been written in. Now, And Ezra's, I would say one of the things that Ezra did, which is he set up this system of Torah reading, and he had the Torah read by the Watergate, which is essentially the public square. He was the one who took the Torah to the people. It was, in a way, it's a way of saying that the Torah wasn't in the temple. It went to Pacific Center. It went to the place where people would gather. And the institution of Torah reading is very much an institution about the idea that of where the Torah is meant to be, and it needs to be accessed by people. Now, one of the things that Ezra started was this idea of the Hagbah, that people actually had to see the letters of the Torah. Now, I want to also just show you the way that we have the Torah today. Here. The way they have the Torah today is, see if I can make this big enough to see well. Okay. I just want to share my screen to those who are on Zoom. Give me 1 second to set everything up properly.
Meanwhile, mask something?
I would prefer if you hold your question for a minute, because I want to make a point and not lose my mind, and then I will happily. Okay. So this is a picture of the Aleppo Codex from Parshat Vizot HaBracha. Now, this looks a little bit like a Torah scroll, but it is not the same as a Torah scroll. This is produced by the Ben Amram. These types of scrolls were produced in Tveria, in Tiberias, by the Ben Amram family. And there's certain parts of this which are very critical to the way in which we read the Torah. First of all, Hebrew, as it was, I think, given to Moses, did not have these little dots here and there. In the same way that, I don't know, has anyone ever seen those funny skits of Gallagher? I mean, he's a comic in the 70s, where he's like, he goes through like the way in which certain English words are, and the pronunciations and the way things should be pronounced, and you kind of realize how hard it must be to learn English, because the way things are, you put a couple of the right letters together and you get totally different pronunciations. Well, people tend to actually have recognition of words, and to this day, most Israelis do not read with nikudot. If you take a modern Hebrew book, you will see that it really doesn't have vowels. Occasionally, they will put a vowel in here or there to distinguish one word from another. But I would say one in 1,000 words might have those dots. But if I pick up a modern Hebrew book, here, do me a favor, Daniel, pull the volume of the Talmud off the shelf there. That right there, the brown, right exactly there. Yeah, just pull that off. Now you open it up. For those who are here in the room, they'll see here. You're not going to find a dot on the page, right? That is how Hebrew was written. Now that Hebrew was written probably 200 years ago, right? For 200 years, there's not a dot on that page. But when it comes to the reading of the Torah, we are not going to allow ourselves to mispronounce even a single word. And so the Torah came to have a set of markings in it, nukudot, that would help us with the vocalization. It goes even further than that, though. And I'll demonstrate why you need this with the following skit from Sesame Street. It is a skit that I tell people about often because it's about how you, it depends on how you say a sentence. So there is Big Bird fishing in a pond. And Kermit comes up to Big Bird and says, Big Bird, can't you read the sign? And Big Bird says, what do you mean? And Kermit says, the sign says, keep out, no fishing allowed. And Big Bird says, no, that's not how you read the sign. It says, keep out, no fishing allowed, right? So these are obviously very important differences in the way you're going to read. So the Torah, the Masoretes, as they were called, these were the rabbis in the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries who created these codices that tell us how to do this. They created a set of signs. So I'm going to try and use the annotation tool here to show you some of the signs. But this sign, this little L sign right here, that is a munach, right? And trying to read carefully. Okay, this wishbone over here is called an etnachta. The etnachta is the comma in the middle of the sentence. That tells you to pause. Sometimes you're going to see two commas. They look like two mirror image commas. That's called a merchati b'cha. What these do is they tell you which phrases to pair together, how to put the pauses within the sentence. And so there is a set of cantillations which are to be found. We've all of the printed Tanakhs, they're also found in these codices, and they tell us how it actually, they're used as a set of singing indications, but they, at the same time, what they do is they show you how to break up the Torah. And we try to be very, very careful about making sure that the Torah is both sung correctly, meaning that its phraseology is correct, and that its pronunciation is correct. Generally speaking, we correct a Balkore, we correct the Torah reader for mistakes in pronunciation, and we don't correct for mistakes in the song or the tune, except for two things. Those two things are this wishbone right here. It's called the etnachta. You have to hit that. You have to know where the pause in the middle of the sentence is. And also the sof pasuk. The sof pasuk is the end of the sentence. And that is, by the way, interestingly indicated by these two dots, the colon, right? That is the sign for the end of a sentence. This is a unique, well, you know, I'm not going to get into too much directions on this, but one of the other things that these cantillations do is they tell you where to put, onto which syllable to put the emphasis. So just we'll pick this one right here. This is called the Zakef Gadol. Actually, let me clear my drawings. Okay, so this particular one right here, I'm going to circle it very small. That's called the Zakef Gadol. So this word is mi yamino, which means from his right hand. Now, it could be sung mi yamino, right? Where the emphasis is on the second mem. But because the cantillation is on top of the nun, it is mi yamino.
Exactly, yeah.
Right? So that tells you exactly where you're going to put the emphasis, onto which syllable, so to speak, you're going to put the emphasis. So I'm just giving you this as a way of understanding, you know, what the evolution, if you will, of Torah and Torah reading. How do we know what to say? How do we know how to sing? It all comes from this particular place in these codices, which represent the distilled wisdom of many, many generations of scholarship to be able to make sure that that is correct. Okay, so that's yes.
But there's nothing in the scroll.
Yes, you will not find that in our Torah scrolls today. This gets translated into our Chumash. This is used to be able to to inform the Torah scrolls. Okay, Jonathan, right? But then could the word be taken out of the text and read in isolation, or could be confused, or cannot be confused with another?
Is that clear? I mean, so if we ask, let's say, Rafai Itai, as like a proficient Hebrew speaker, if I see a word without nekudot, is it that a Hebrew speaker knows the word without nekudot independent of the context, even if the letters are the same? That's
No. Okay, so you're correct. I mean, there are different kinds of words, right? There's some words which are unique enough that I don't need any context,
right.
And there are other words where so there's an interesting example in Parshat Vayetze, right? Where the word Vayishak, which means to kiss, and Vayashk, which means to water, appear in close succession. And you need to know that you water sheep and you kiss women. Right. So that's an example of, I need the context to inform the pronunciation. But that's true in English also, I think. So there are of course some of those words that appear, and so you need to know when to read it as each one, but and sometimes that's the point of that, 1 in 1,000 words in a published Hebrew book you might find nekudot in, but generally speaking you have that. Now the Talmud likes to play on that idea. I mean, we're a little far afield, but it's an interesting thing, right? So it says about the words on the luchot, it says charut al haluchot, right? The words were chiseled into the luchot. And the rabbis like to say, al tikra charut, don't read it charut, chiseled into the stone, ella cherut, freedom, right? So the idea is that the law makes you free, right? That the structure has an element of delivering freedom. So that's just an example of how the same word can be read two ways, and the rabbis like to actually infuse that meaning. But okay,
isn't it the spelling? Charut in tet.
No, they're both with tough.
In taf?
I'm pretty sure.
I'm forgetting my Hebrew.
Wrong, but I'm pretty sure.
I have to write it down. Okay.
All right, you can, since you can research this while I talk, I'll let you do that research as we go. Now, all right. So I'm going to. All right, we're going to take down the. Hold on a second. I need to. Oh, here we go. All right, stop. Okay, good. Now we're no longer looking at the Aleppo Kodesh because we don't need to see it at the moment, and we're just going to give some basics of Torah reading. What to expect when. Actually, before that, I want to just say one thing about what I think Torah reading represents. To us Jews, Torah reading represents this idea that revelation is a constant. The book of Exodus, Shemot, which we are going to start the week after next, is an interesting book. The first half of the book of Shemot is slavery, Pharaoh, plagues, sea splits, mountain, smoke, shofar, right? All that stuff, right? Then we get teaching of Torah, right? And then we have a sin of the golden calf, and then we have a lot of technical drawings, right? Then we have this Mishkan. So the Ramban, Nachmanides, gives us a very important lesson about this. And that lesson is that the revelation is something which needs a home afterwards. And that's what the temple is meant to be. The temple is meant to be sort of the revelation ritualized, if you will, right? The center of the temple are the tablets of the law. That this is sort of God's presence has a sort of sense of an ongoing revelation to us, that God continues in a sense to speak to us, reveal himself to us through the Torah. And so the centerpiece, to a certain extent, of every service, certainly a Shabbat service, is going to be the Torah reading. And the Torah reading is, in a way, it's sort of modeled after the idea that there's a revelation at Sinai. And so there is this feature of the prayer, which is an expression of revelation. And I think that it's very helpful to see it in those terms. Now, in terms of the particulars are that the study of Torah is considered part of the fabric of Jewish life. And so the rabbis essentially interpret the verse. It says, "Vayelchu shlosha yamim v'lo matzu mayim." They walked 3 days and they did not find water. And the rabbis are going to say, "Ein mayim ela Torah." There is no water except for Torah. The idea is that in the same way that you do not live for a period of time without water, so too you do not go for a period of time without the study of Torah. Study of Torah is it is the oxygen for the Jew. I think it's sort of funny. I was involved once upon a time in a case for I was an expert witness for the Hebrew Academy because they were being prosecuted by the Crown for a tax issue. And the question was, what is the definition of ministering to a congregation? Now, I hang around with Jews almost all my life. My grandfather was a rabbi, my great-grandfather was a cantor, my cousin is a rabbi, I was trained by a lot of rabbis, I hung around a lot of rabbis. Ain't no rabbi I know about talks about ministering to a congregation. That is a Christian term. Rabbis don't minister, right? That's just not what we do. So what is it that we do? So, can you get married without a rabbi? Yes. Can you have a bar mitzvah without a rabbi? Yes. Can you, I'm trying to think about can you have Yom Kippur without a rabbi? Yes. Can you have Rosh Hashanah without a rabbi? Yes. The rabbi is not, I know I'm in a sense talking myself out of a job here, but the rabbi's job is to teach Torah. That's why you have a rabbi. And in Yiddish, what do they call the synagogue? Synagogue is a Greek word which means a place of gathering. What's the Yiddish word for a synagogue?
Shul.
Shul is Yiddish, which it means school. It's where you learn, right? So that's what rabbis do. They teach Torah. That's the central thing. And so the way that Jewish ritual is structured is that you need to have these episodes of Torah engagement throughout the week. Now, originally, they used to do, not only would they do Torah in Hebrew, but in the time of the Talmud, the lingua franca was not Hebrew. It was Aramaic. So they would have a maturgaman. They would have someone who would be up there translating the words as you were reading. Now, there were certain parts you weren't allowed to translate. They were considered a little too spicy. And we didn't want just anybody to know what was going on. So you'd be a little bit surprised what some of those are. For example, the second telling of the story of the golden calf was one of the ones which is too spicy. But and that's because it sounds like Aaron may have just thrown something in and the calf created itself. Anyhow, there is a very regular structure of Torah reading. The regular structure of Torah reading is you're going to read on Monday morning, Thursday morning, you're going to read a full parsha on Shabbat, and you're going to read at Shabbat Mincha. At Shabbat Mincha, you always pick up where you left off Shabbat morning. So last week we finished Parshat Vayigash, and so immediately after we finish Parshat Vayigash, we start Parshat Vayechi. This week we're going to finish Vayechi. We're going to start Shemot. So there's an unending chain of those. There are, incidentally, 54 parshiot. Now, I'm going to make people a little bleary-eyed with a little bit of math, but it's not going to be too bad. Trust me. There are 354 days in a Jewish year, because every month is 29 and a half days. Multiply by 12, you get 354. 354 works out to 50 and change Shabbatot a year. Now, 54 parshiot, you have to fit them into 50 weeks. And that's on a good year. Some years, you're going to have Pesach falls on Shabbat, Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat. So on those years, those weeks, you're not going to read the regular parsha. So there are some parshiot which get doubled up. Those parshiot can be Vayakel Pakude, Tazria Mitzora. There, you'll see within the cycle of the year, there are going to be certain parshiot which are going to be doubled up. Now, just to make it a little bit confusing, we don't always read the same number of aliyot, right? On the regular, ordinary schedule, Monday, Thursday, Shabbat, Mincha, you're going to read 3 aliyot. Shabbat, you read 7 plus a maftir. After I do all the numbers, I'm going to tell you what the maftir is. It's very interesting, perhaps not what you think. Hanukkah, we're going to read 3, if we're talking weekday Hanukkah. Rosh Chodesh, you're going to read 4. Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of a holiday, you're going to read 4. Yom Tov, regular Yom Tov that does not fall on Shabbat, you're going to read 5. And Yom Kippur, you're going to read 6. Right? So that there's a lot of numbers to keep track there. You could find it in a chart. It's not terribly hard to find, but I'm just letting you know that that's sort of the varied way now things work out. What is a maftir? Maftir is confusing. The maftir is, there was a time during the Hadrianic persecutions that the Jews were not allowed to read from the Torah. So they said, okay, we can't read from the Torah. We can't read about the death of Jacob, but we can't read about Jacob on his deathbed, but we can read from the Navi, we can read from the prophets. Maybe the Romans thought this was just Jewish history. Okay, we'll let them read Jewish history. They're going to read, instead of reading about Jacob going to his deathbed, we're going to read about David going to his deathbed, right? So there's always a connection between those two. That was the Haftorah. However, the rabbi said it is nowadays, after the Hadrianic persecutions are over, when we live in relative freedom, right? Neither Justin Trudeau nor Pierre Poilievre nor Jagmeet Singh cares whether or not I read Torah or Haftorah. They will let me read either one. They have no horse in that race, as far as I know. And so I can read both. And so can all the rest of the Jews in Canada and the United States and the United Kingdom and South Africa and all over the world, pretty much. Maybe in Iran they have some restrictions, but even Iran actually has some respect for religion. So nowadays I can read the Haftorah. The halacha says it is disrespectful for someone to get up and read Haftorah if they haven't read Torah first. So the first 7 aliyahs we read because that's the commandment. That's the law. You have to read. The guy who gets the Haftorah, he reads maftir only because we think it's disrespectful for him to do that without doing the Haftorah. I'm bringing you back 5 years. I know it's hard to believe. 5 years ago was COVID. So 5 years ago during COVID, the protocol was that Joseph Marciano read all 7 aliyot. We didn't want 2 people next to each other sharing germs. So everybody was at distance. Joseph Marciano read the entire Torah reading. Now, he's read 7 aliyot. We didn't make him read one more because he was going to read Haftorah. Right? Because the only reason you do that aliyah is in order to not be disrespectful to the Torah. Now, during non-COVID years, we need to give all the honors out to different people. So we don't ever give the same aliyah to 2 people twice. But COVID was a different story. So what is that? That long story was just a way of telling you that the maftir, the aliyah of maftir is actually a lesser aliyah. It is an aliyah that is only there so that you don't read the Haftorah without having first read the Torah. Now, the structure of the Torah reading is the minimum size of an aliyah is 3 verses. There is a lot of detail around that. I'm not going to sort of belabor that, but you need to make sure that there's not like a paragraph break, that you don't leave off with sort of one sentence in a dangling position. There's a lot of work that's done to make sure that we always have, we stop in the right parts of the paragraphs. That's not something that the average person has to worry about because we have demarcations for that. In theory, you are allowed to add aliyot. This is a dangerous thing. I'll tell you why. There is a firm halachic concept called tircha de tzibura, which means unnecessarily burdening the congregation. And so I am a TTJ, Tircha de Tzibura Justice Warrior, JW. I am one of these people who has to suffer the complaints of the services in Shaare Tzedek are too long. There has been times when rabbis came in here a long time ago, and they said this minyan is what we call tsar balei chayim, right? Tsar balei chayim is that if a horse is suffering, that you put it to death, so you don't let the animal suffer. So that was the what they said about our minyan, because we tend to go on long. Now we go on longer than some people because we refuse not to say a prayer for the hostages every Shabbat, and we refuse not to say a bracha for the state of Israel, and we like to have a drasha. And your rabbi sometimes can't keep his drashot short. So that's why sometimes it goes long. So we have to, we try not to add any aliyot, but in principle you are allowed to do so. Okay, so that's sort of the structure, 7 aliyot on Shabbat plus a maftir. The maftir happens on days when there is work is forbidden. So Shabbat, Yom Tov are the days when you're going to have a haftorah. Interestingly, maybe Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, they throw one in for good measure. But that's more of a Zionist rallying cry than it is a core halacha. Okay.
Haftarah or haftorah?
It is haftarah. There's
That's
a whole
what I
debate
thought.
about what that word's supposed to mean. Is it could mean that it lahaftir, like patur. It is a release from the stringencies of Torah reading. And generally speaking, so I said that the minimum unit of an aliyah is 3. The haftorah is generally going to be around 21 verses, or minimum of 21 verses, because we try and parallel it to the minimum size of a Torah reading.
So if the word is haftarah, why is some people called haftorah?
Because we are lazy speakers, and we make these associations, right? And we think, okay, well, first we had the whole Torah reading, then we had the half Torah reading, right? I can't give you a better explanation than that. But it's a different word. Okay. Now let's just talk for a moment about how the Torah is read. The Torah was meant to be read by 7 individuals. Each one of those individuals is expected to know how to pronounce all of the words in their aliyah, and how to do all the phraseology, and also how to sing this properly, right? So we would call up Ya'amod, we would call up Rabbi Berger, Ya'amod Melech Ben Shmuel, and he would get up and he would read his parsha. Then I would call up Howard Kolner, and then I would call up Jeffrey Klayman, and each one of them, they would get up and they would read their aliyah, and they would be, hopefully they would know the Torah by heart, and no problem. Now I know some people who can cold read almost any parsha in the Torah. I don't know if anybody remembers Ami Ein Dor. He was our Torah reader, our second Torah reader doing a lot of COVID. He was one of those people. Joseph Marciano probably at this stage also could cold read almost any aliyah. He prepares, but you could parachute him into almost any aliyah. He's been doing it for many years, and he can cold read any parsha of the Torah. But this is not no longer something that everyone can do, regrettably, and so we come to the institution of the Baal Koreh, the official Torah reader. right? That's Joseph Marciano in our congregation, but in other places there are other people. Sometimes it rotates, sometimes it's person for hire. There's no one rule about that, and there's some communities where there's so many people who want to read, you have to reserve it far in advance, and it's hard to some places it's hard to, especially in Israel, it's hard to get into the cycle because so many people like reading the Torah and know how to read it.
Many women know.
Okay, this so Annie's bringing up the women question. All right, I will briefly deal with the women question. The Talmud says, "Hakol olin minyan shiva." All can read in the 7 aliyot. Afilu katan v'isha, even a child, even a woman. Ella mipnei kavod hatzibur, except for
not to insult the man.
The congregation. I would say the broadly accepted consensus on that is that that only men read the Torah. There are some places that have tried to push the boundaries and let women read the Torah. I would say they are generally frowned upon in the Orthodox world, but it is certainly an issue of controversy. But anybody standing for a conversion test and they ask you, can a woman read the Torah? You can quote the line in the Talmud, but say that that's not how we operate these days. It's a very interesting and complicated question, but generally speaking, I think if I had to give my sort of best idea of how to explain this, is that the Orthodox world does not want to be pushed into a particular decision because of Western feminist ideology. And so, in a way, the strong resistance to women reading the Torah is a bit of a resistance to having Western cultural influences defining halachic preference. And since, in the days of Nachmanides, women did not read the Torah, and in the days of the Vilna Gaon, women did not read the Torah, and in the days of the Mishnah Berurah, women did not read the Torah. So we're not going to, the general idea is we're not going to initiate that now. This, by the way, this is different when it comes to Megillah reading, because Megillah reading, there's the Mishnah and the Talmud seem to be much more approving of women reading Megillah, certainly for women. But again, that I don't want to get too deep into that particular subject at the moment. But what I do want to do a little bit is give people just a little bit of a sense of what happens when you get up for your aliyah. When you get called up to the aliyah, they will call you up by your name and your father's name, typically. So I would be called up as Hananya Tuvia ben Yosef Eliyahu. My father's name was Yosef Eliyahu. Now, just a sort of interesting, quirky kind of thing that let's just say your father was somebody who was a public anti-Semite. Maybe let's go back to Herzl's day, where people may have converted to Christianity and started voting with the anti-Semite party in Vienna. Right? Let's say you had such a father. He became Christian and he became Catholic, and he changed his name from Chaim to James, and he instead of putting on tefillin in the morning, he takes mass. So, but Chaim's, so you were Yosef ben Chaim. Now your father Chaim is James, but your grandfather was Ruvain. So the Mishnah Berurah says that you call him up as Yosef ben Ruvain. You just skip a generation. Now this is actually something which is a very important question here in our world. Sometimes you have people whose mothers are Jewish, their fathers are not Jewish, and their grandfathers are Jewish. So the question is, how do you call that person up to the Torah? So there are two ways to call that person up to the Torah. One, you can call that person up to the Torah as Yosef, and then the son of the grandfather's name. But you can also call someone up by their mother's name. You can call him up by there's mother. Now some people might be embarrassed to be called up, Yosef ben Sarafega, because that everybody else is being called up as Yosef ben Chaim, Yosef ben Shmuel, right? They're all men's names up there. So if assuming that instead of calling up by Chayafega had a father whose name was Avram, so you could call him up by Yosef ben Avram, and those are two possibilities. Anyway, that was a bit of a side point, but I thought it was an interesting side point. So you get called up to the Torah. You do not go to the Torah until you get called up. No one goes up unless they are called up. And then generally speaking, the order is Kohen, Levi, Israel. What if there's no Kohen? What do? So here there's a bit of dispute, but I think the truest way to do it is to just start and say no Levi and just go straight to a Yisrael, someone who's not a Levi. But you can start with a Levi. What if there is a Kohen but no Levi? Then you call up the Kohen for the first two aliyot, because the tribe of Kohen is really a subset of the tribe of Levi. But you never call up a Levi twice. Only Kohen gets that. So Yamod Kohen bimkom Levi. Sometimes that happens. Okay, now first one is a Kohen, second one's a Levi, third one's Yisrael. When you get called up to the Torah, the first thing that happens when you get up there is the Baal Koreh shows you where he's going to read. He's going to show you where the verse is that he's going to read. Then you take your talit, or if it's mincha or a time when you're not wearing your talit, sometimes you take the gartel, the belt that we use for the Sefer Torah, and you touch that. And all of this, by the way, is the Ashkenazic version. In the Sephardic version, it's similar, but sometimes the Sephardic ones they have a kerchief. You're supposed to hold the Torah as you make the bracha. You're supposed to close the Torah as you make the bracha. You're not supposed to look in the Torah. Why? Because we don't want people to think that the blessings are written in the Torah. The blessings are on the Torah, but they're not written in the Torah. So you make your blessing. Some people say you turn to the right side. Very common thing to do. We usually have the brachot printed on the right side. Some places you'll see the brachot are printed sort of upright, usually on the right side. You're going to turn. You're going to say, you start with Baruch Hu. Everybody answers Baruch Hu. And then you read the blessing over the Torah. Then the Baal Koreh begins to read. Now, there is a wrinkle in all of this. Sometimes the Baal Koreh is not paying attention. And sometimes he can show you the wrong column and he gets all confused and he realizes, oh my gosh, we have to be in a different place. Then you have to make a new bracha if you were shown the wrong place. But if he's only like a line or two off and you knew you were going to go down there and you could have still seen where it was, most people say you don't have to make a new bracha. So again, you need to see where it is. If he has to roll to get to the right place, then you have to make a new bracha. Doesn't have to roll to get to a new place, you don't have to make a new bracha. Okay? Now, let me ask the $1 million 21st century question. Not every Jew, regrettably, reads Hebrew. Can you get an aliyah if you cannot read Hebrew? Or I'll go one step further. What if you are fully blind? Can a blind person get an aliyah? Now I'll remind you that the Torah reader must read from the words. He cannot read by heart. He must use the words as a prompt. Aha.
If he's not reading the Torah, but only saying the brachot, then it would be okay. He could do it from heart.
Okay, so Debbie says, okay, what if I throw a wrinkle in there and say, Debbie, really, since you're making the bracha over the reading of the Torah, you're supposed to read the Torah yourself, but we have Joseph Marciano there who's going to read it for us publicly, because we know that not every Chaim, James, and Chad knows how to read the Torah. So,
well, listen, Rabbi,
hold on. I'll finish the question and then I'll give you a chance, I promise, but I need to get one point across. The Shulchan Aruch says that you should read each word in an undertone. Because ultimately your bracha is on reading the Torah and you're supposed to read it. So let's just say your parsha was part of Shema, and he says, Vayomer Hashem al Moshe lemor. You're supposed to say in undertone, not to simulcast, but an undertone. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe lemor, and Daber al bnei Yisrael v'marta lehem tzitzit. You're supposed to say all those words in an undertone, and as he says those things. So, okay, now Debbie, tell me, what about the blind person?
For the brachot or for the reading?
The whole thing, the whole enchilada, because you're getting an aliyah.
Well, then a blind
someone
person
who can't
cannot,
read.
Yeah, but
then
the
a blind
blind
person can.
So
We can say the brachot in Braille. But the reading, I mean, most people can't read anything of the Torah when it's open, when the scroll is open anyway. Blind or otherwise.
certainly most people in our community. I agree with you. Most people in our community cannot read anything. So the halacha is as follows. We try to make sure that people can read, but the Mishnah Berurah says our custom is to be lenient. And we even let a blind person get an aliyah.
I say
Perhaps
yes.
this is because we are relying on the Baal Koreh. But certainly a blind person could not be a Baal Koreh.
But you can say the brachot from Braille or by heart.
No, well, either way, I guess. That's not material to us. All right, the one other thing that I'll do, just to close out this first installment on Torah reading, is in addition to the regular parshiot, there are a couple of special readings. Those are the reading for Parshat Zachor, which is considered biblical, to remember to wipe out Amalek. There is Parshat Para. These four special parshiot are all in advance of Passover. First one is Amalek, that comes before Purim. Then we have Shkalim, which is taking the census, because that was done in the month of Adar, so that also happens in advance of Purim. We also have Parshat Para. Parshat Para is the purificational ritual. So there's an idea in Torah that sometimes if you can't do something, reading about it sort of fills its place. So we would all attempt to become pure before Passover, as it would be in the temple context. But that doesn't exist anymore. So we read the parsha of that, and then we also read the parsha of HaChodesh. HaChodesh is the parsha about the new month. We read that before the month of Nisan, which would always have been the first of the months of the year. What if good question. What if the Torah reading gets interrupted by something like a false fire alarm, or even a real fire alarm, right? It doesn't have to be false. That would be an interrupted. So the answer to that would be, if the Torah reader and the Ola, the person getting the Aliyah, could maintain their concentration until such point that they sort of still said, look, we're not going to talk, we're still in the zone, then you wouldn't have to say a new bracha. But if they're interrupted to an extent that they sort of left the mental zone, right? This is a very relevant question. I should maybe next week I can find that. In Israel, the false fire alarm is called a missile attack, right? So in a missile attack, what's the halacha? What are you supposed to do? So I'm not sure exactly how they handle it, but you're supposed to go to the mamad, you're supposed to go to the shelter, and in that shelter, you're supposed to wait till 10 minutes after that. So I would say most people cannot stay in the zone for that 10-minute period. And my guess is that they make a new bracha, but that'll be my homework to find out.
But it's pikuach nefesh. You must stop.
Nobody said it's not pikuach nefesh. Nobody says don't go down. The question is, it's not pikuach nefesh to not say the bracha or to say the bracha. At that point, your life has been saved. You've gone to your mamad, you've come out, you're good, right?
Yes.
Your life is not saved by not saying the bracha. Your life is not saved by saying the bracha. I agree with you, Eddie, that you should go to the mamad. But not everything that happens because of pikuach nefesh means that you don't have a ritual obligation.
Are you saying there's a siren in the synagogue in the middle of the reading, or even in the middle of the beginning of the bracha, it should not be stopped and everybody should rush over to the mamad?
Yes, I would say. Let's say we're reading an aliyah. In the middle of the aliyah, the siren goes off, right? Of course, everyone should go to the shelter.
And then they resume after 10 minutes, they come back and resume wherever they.
I'm not. So far, we're with each other. We're resuming. What you're saying, Annie, is they don't have to make a new bracha, and I'm going to say maybe they were talking about the stupid Houthis in the Mamad, right? They're reading about Joseph, but they're talking about the Houthis.
No, I have no problem with them saying another bracha. That's quite all
Right,
right.
that's my only point. My point is that if they're talking about the Houthis, they're talking about Netanyahu, they're talking about Galant, they're talking about Ben Gvir, whoever they're talking about in the Mamad, who they might talk about, I don't know who else to have them talk about. This is a theoretical situation. But if they're talking about any of those people, they're not talking about Yosef, and so they have to make a new bracha.
I agree.
Okay. So the last thing I just want to point out with this is sometimes you take out, most times you take one Sefer Torah. Other times you take out two, and on a very rare occasion you take out three, never four. Why do you take out one? Because you always need to read one. Why do you take out two? Because if it happens to be Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat, so we don't want you to roll from, let's say, the book of Bereshit to the book of Bamidbar, which could take 10 minutes, so as not to inconvenience the congregation, you take two scrolls. Some Shabbatot could be Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh and a special parsha, or Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh and Chanukah. When you have a threefer, you have three Sifrei Torah. Simchat Torah, you always have three Sifrei Torah, because you're always reading the end of the Torah, then you're reading the beginning of the Torah, so you finish with Devarim, very last chapters of Devarim, V'zot HaBracha, then you're going to read Bereshit, that's two Torahs, and then you also have to read the Maftir, because it's also Shmini Atzeret, so you read, you take out three Sifrei Torah, so that's I guess finishes us off with the basics of Torah reading to a certain extent. Okay.